Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey, what's up, guys? Time for another One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute video, and Just got home from work, waiting on this little line of storms to move through, and I'm gonna jump on the bike and go do some riding. So still loving it, still enjoying it. Also started playing some music again too, and my brother Eric Wolf out at Stolen Wolf, he sent me a gorgeous little guitar that I love, and then I've got a Les Paul that somebody sent along as well, and really enjoying getting back into playing some music. But you know, Eric and I are probably going to write some music here and there, and then I'll be doing a lot of stuff for If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything this season, which I'm getting ready to start recording here in the next couple of weeks as we speak. But the other thing is that currently we've almost got the 2025 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac finished up formatting. About to send it off to the printer, so it's going to be in your hands here shortly. So once that's off my plate, that opens some things up a little bit more for me to be able to work on things like If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. But anyways, excuse me. Again, every time I make a video, I have hiccups for some reason. Let's get into some questions for you guys. And if you guys have questions, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, YouTube comments below, and or my social media, and I'll be glad to get back with you about anything I can help you with the art of distillation, be it professional, amateur, legal, or illicit. Doesn't matter to me. It's all the same art. So let's see. Hey, Alan, I'm sorry to hear about your flood ordeal, but I'm glad your family's safe and your home is still there. Me too, man. I really appreciate that. I've been distilling off and on for a few years now, starting with my chili pot as a boiler and working up to building a 15.5 gallon keg with a 2-inch copper CCVM head. The spirit I have the most success with is vodka or neutral spirits using my 54-inch column packed with half-inch glass balls. I'm able to make cuts that generate what I think is a pretty clean product that I find preferable to a lot of commercial offerings. I'm also able to take runs of other things that didn't go so well and using sodium carbonate or calcium hydroxide to boost the pH get a surprising amount of returns on. I've also pulled off some pretty good, to me anyways, 100% blackstrap molasses rum runs. It sounds like you're already doing some pretty advanced stuff here. My problem is that I can't seem to get a whiskey distilled that isn't pulling tails pretty much all the way through the run, no matter how slow I run and pot still mode. I also bought a couple of those 2-inch perf plates and put them in the sight glass, and while they look like they're running fine, the bad flavor comes through even before the heads are finished. Vapor speed maybe? I've read the 2-inch plates don't really work. I have to admit that I'm not completely sure I know what tails taste like. When I read about people describing them in places such as homedistiller.org, or I watch videos about them such as what Jesse puts out, I can't really say that's what I am getting that's unpleasant. Cardboard or wet dog doesn't describe it to me. Sometimes there's a component that takes my breath away, like a different form of alcohol is being produced. I can't really describe it any other way, but it's definitely the character I get when the reflux column starts putting nastiness out at the end of my neutral runs, so I assume that that's it. I built a couple Bad Mo clones full of rum currently and plan to build more if I just get a decent whiskey to put in them. I had one halfway decent 100% corn run that was in one of the Bad Mo's for 6 months before I sampled it down to non-existence. That'll happen. I ended up using reflux on a short partial pack column to get that far. I also end up doing the same on my molasses runs. I'm not stripping all the flavor out, but certainly I'm losing a lot of it. The last 2 attempts were 75 pounds of milled feed corn with 8 pounds of pale malt, 8 pounds of white wheat malt, 8 pounds of rye malt, and 3 pounds of honey malt. Trying to approximate a honey bear bourbon with what my now out of business brew shop had left. I had got good conversion at a specific gravity of 1060, using HTL and glucoenzymes at the right temps and pHs respectively, using Red Star bread yeast as I usually do, with boiled yeast, DAP, Epsom salts, and added an oyster shell and mesh bag just in case it fermented down to 0.996-ish. I did let the ferment temperature get up a bit high, up to 105, and used frozen water jugs to knock it back down a couple times on the first try, and used the mash chiller to keep me from having such a swing second time. I take the clear top of the fermenter and then squeeze the grains with a mop wringer in a mesh bag. I then let that clear again and do my best to put just that in the boiler. I run 3 to 4 full bore stripping runs in pot mode to collect enough low ones for a single spirit run, no matter what I'm making as my process. It includes what I might be doing wrong before I throw another $100 into my fermenter. Could I actually have made something that can't be distilled into something drinkable? Am I just making some obvious mistake in trying to run the plates, or just a short pot still head? Thinking first stop trying to ferment in summer where it routinely hits double digits and shoot for cooler fermentation temperatures. Next try keeping 100% corn to save money until I can consistently make something I don't have to throw in the faints jug and turn into vodka. Maybe stop using bread yeast. This might be a bit rambling, but did you say you want questions? Maybe I didn't supply you enough information. If so, please let me know. Thanks for all you do for the home distillers. No, this is great. It's a fantastic email with a lot of good information that you've dropped for us here. So a couple thoughts. So with bourbon, not to say you can't make a decent bourbon with a small column and with plates, that you can, even on single pass. I'm a double pot still guy. No reflux on that second run whatsoever. Pull it off as is. Nothing at all wrong with bread yeast. As a matter of fact, most of the spirits at Spirits of French Lick that I distilled when I was at Spirits of French Lick that won awards all over the place from some big name writers had a component of bread yeast in them. Fleischmann's bread yeast. Fleischmann started off as a distillery, and that yeast was literally a distiller's yeast. So there's nothing wrong with that. The high temperature can have some effect at 105 degrees fermentation. Yeah, you're going to stress out that yeast a little bit, probably get some off flavors, specifically bread yeast, but it shouldn't be doing what you're saying. I will tell you what I did notice though. So you talked about using a lot of malt. Let me go back and see which malts even it was that you said that you were doing here. So of course I said over here somewhere where I don't know where it is. Anyways, so you're using multiple malts. So the interesting thing about malts is that malts has a very high protein component to it and a lot of nitrogen. And anyone who's distilled single malt, specifically if you ever distill it on the grain, will tell you that sometimes it comes off the still very unappealing. Sometimes it sits in the barrel for years, very unappealing. It doesn't make a particularly good white dog, in my opinion. Those high levels of malt will definitely pull some odd flavors across, some very nitrogen forward flavors, and I know this sounds terrible, sometimes kind of a dog shit aroma, to be quite honest with you. That's the only way I know how to say it. That's what you want. So, but you're going to go into a barrel with that, right? You're not making a white spirit, you're going into a barrel. And this is something that it really takes home distillers a long time when they get into the legal business to understand. But bear in mind that when you are distilling to go into a barrel, that white dog that's coming off the still is not always going to be something that you think is good or drinkable or at all the approach that you're going to take, when you're making a white spirit versus one that's going to go into a barrel. There are a lot of mash bills that I've designed over the years that is a white spirit off the still. They're horrible. They just are. They're designed to go into that barrel and to have that process of alchemy over time transform them from the base spirit that they are into alchemical gold, to change things through microoxidization and through esterification and through time in that barrel, long periods of time in that barrel, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. There were mash bills at Spirits of French Lick, for example, that if you had asked me, and the Morning Glory is one of them, it's still not one of my favorite whiskeys because I'm not a big fan of kasha or buckwheat in a whiskey, but it did extremely well for us when I was at Spirits of French Lick. If you had asked me when that came off the still what I thought of it, I had told you it was trash, because in my opinion, it was trash. But it turns out that's the way that product had to be distilled. I tried to clean it up a couple times and mature that in the same way. It didn't turn out the same as what it did those first few times. It needed that component, that weirdness, to really hold up and do what it was going to do. So don't necessarily try to justify the quality of what's coming off of your still as a white spirit versus one that's going to go into a cask and age over time. Definitely understand that what comes off the still chemically is not the same as what's going to come out of that cask chemically, and they're going to be two very, very different entities altogether. There's nothing wrong with using those malts. Just understand that when you're using a lot of malts, you are going to pull a lot of protein sort of characteristics across and have those as a component of that base spirit. So if I were you, I'd drop those plates out, especially if you're already doing stripping runs. I'd do straight up strips and then straight up doubles. No reflux whatsoever, no plates, nothing. Just straight up double pot still distillation, pull it off heavy. You want to leave some funkiness in there, some tails in there. The other thing to consider too is I don't know where you are cutting the tails at necessarily, right, or what you're calling tails now. I know you're saying the odd flavor comes across throughout the tails, but the other thing is, and you know this from running, vodka even, you're compressing everything. So if you're running those plates on that doubling run, your tails cut might be as high as 120, right? 120 proof. It sounds crazy to people who've never done it or haven't experienced it enough to realize this, but on a double pot still run with reflux, you compress things enough that even with just a couple plates, your tails cut can be way up there, can be right at 120 or so. It's the same thing even at Old Homestead, where with the double thumper, we get enough rectification off that double thumper system that we're cutting the tails at 120 almost every time consistently. And pretty much true of the double pot still at Old Homestead, even when we're not running plates. That riser is so high that I get reflux off it, and I'm cutting the tails at about 115 on straight up double pot still there. So those are all things to consider. But yes, that was a great set of questions. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Things that make me think, things that excite me, things that I can hopefully help you guys out with, and get to use technical terms like dog shit. I don't think you're going to find any other distiller anywhere on the internet saying, you know, that's one of the components is dog shit. You know, that's what it turns out like sometimes. So, but yeah, keep them coming, guys. Love y'all. Later. Hey, one more short little thing here. I missed this in the previous email. So actually, Randy had sent another email as well, another shorter one, and so I figured I'd just make this all into one video for you guys. But hey, Alan, hope you and your family are doing well and recovering after the flood last month. I wish I could have done something to help. However, you and your family are in my prayers. Guys, everybody did more than enough to help. Even the people that just prayed, that helps as much as anything, putting those positive thoughts out into the universe. And me and my family cannot thank you enough, or thank our friends like Jolie Kasperzak and everybody who donated to us. We can't thank everybody nearly enough for everything that was done for us during this flood. It was a rough time, but really restored some faith in humanity, so to a greater degree than what people probably realize. But anyways, back to the email. I've got a couple questions, but I'll save the second one for another email, the one I just did previously. To follow that will be a little longer. Concerning malt weevils, I had Tyler Richardson will appreciate this. I had a full 50-pound bag of pale malt that had some weevils in it. It appeared the infestation was slight, with only a few worms I could find, along with a few cocoons clinging to the side of the bag. I sifted through the grain fairly well before milling. I picked out 3 or 4 small clumps of a few grains stuck together that looked like they were held together by some webbing. Other than that, the grain looked fairly sound, so I went ahead and used it in an all-malt mash for my whiskey. The malt mashed fine and didn't seem to make much difference. Your thoughts on this matter? Was my decision to use this malt a sound decision? Again, my thoughts and prayers are with you. I'm glad to see you exercising and looking healthier. Thank you. I've been doing the same. I also take note that I haven't seen you smoking in a long while. Always a good sign. Hang in there. Everything in life is a process and a journey. Enjoy the journey. Well, I'm glad you noticed that I've backed off on smoking. So I have not quit smoking, but that has been part of my journey, is trying to quit smoking as well. I've cut about halfway back from where I was at, which is awesome. Saves a ton of money. My goal is to 100% quit smoking. I've been smoking for a long time. I've been exposed to nicotine my whole life. I grew up on a tobacco farm, and I grew up around, you know, my parents didn't smoke, but everybody else in my family did. So it's going to take me a little while to 100% quit, but I will get there. 100%, I will get there. I have to do it on my own terms. It doesn't matter what anyone else says to me, what anybody else thinks of it. It has to be on my terms. I know how my brain works. One of the things that did help is I had Kim go and get money out of the bank, which she would have spent on cigarettes in like 4 days. And so I had her get it in quarters. And then every time I don't smoke a cigarette, I take 50 cents from one jar and put it in a new jar. Right? So I see how much money is being saved, and I see how many cigarettes I'm not smoking. And that has really helped me out tremendously. But back to the question at hand. So Tyler and I have talked about this. So we buy local grain here in Indiana, and I've grown a lot of grain in my life, and I understand the life cycle of weevils. I understand the life cycle of raw grain. I also understand the weevils are already in that grain when you harvest that grain. That's just the nature of it, right? And that, corn gets harvested at a different time of the year than, say, wheat or rye or barley, etc. gets harvested. It's natural to have some weevils, right? I would argue that if your grain doesn't have a few weevils here and there, or even if the grain is, coming up on being a year old, if it doesn't have quite a few weevils, now you want to be careful there. You don't want it to go too far, obviously, and you want to really watch out for mold and things of that nature. But if you're not seeing some weevils in your grain over time, unless you're freezing your grain or something, like you're on a small scale, what are they doing in that grain? It's a good question, right? Weevils are a part of the natural cycle, just like the grain itself is a part of the natural cycle. The storage of the grain, the degradation of the grain, the distillation of the grain, it's all part of the same cycle. If you're not seeing weevils, ask yourself real hard, what are they using to treat that grain? And is what they're using to treat that grain worse than the few weevils that you're going to get in the weevil pechuga whiskey that you're making, right? Now, it's an exaggeration. You don't want that many weevils, but you're going to have weevils. Just the nature of it, you know, in small amounts. And you did exactly what you needed to do. You took out the parts that you didn't want in there, that you didn't need in there. You watched out for mold and that sort of thing. You're good to go. Where people get into problems is where they get into to having bags of grain that have weevils in them, and those bags of grain are the type of bags that have the plastic liner on the inside, because then what happens is the weevils have this tendency to hatch because they're looking for water, right? They got all the food they want water, and that grain starts to get a little moisture in it from those weevils. As they die, they can't get out of that bag. That plastic sack around them wraps them up, and they die in there, and they die in mass. Well, now you've got a compost situation. So you have a double hazard. You have a potential fire hazard, and you also have a massive mold, potentially toxic mold issue, and that's where people really get themselves into trouble. For home distillers, keep your grain in the freezer. Freezer will kill those weevils off. At the very least, keep their numbers down, right? Major distillers are always going to have problems with weevils if they're not buying treated grain. And I will 100% take those weevils over whatever they treat those damn things with. So, there you go, guys. Love y'all. Later.